Hi, welcome to Behavior 103. This is the third in a series of videos where I explain the science of behavior. My name is Bemi and I'm Behavior Coach G. I do two things. One, I simplify the complex science of behavior, and two, I teach you practical ways that you can apply it to your everyday life. If you've been following this series, I started in 101 defining what behavior is, establishing that behavior must pass what we call the dead man's test. It's something that a living, breathing person can't do. So behavior is not feelings and it's not emotions. In 101, I also taught you about the functions of behavior, and I explained that understanding why a behavior is occurring is essential to modifying it. The four functions being access to attention, access to a tangible item, escape and avoidance, or automatic. You can watch that video to gain a better understanding. In 102, we learned about operant conditioning. I introduced you to the world of B.F. Skinner and his experiments and the foundation of behavioral science, which is if you change the consequence that immediately follows a behavior, you can decide if that behavior is going to increase in future or decrease in future. And as I promised in 102, 103, we're going to learn about reinforcement. At the end of this video, you're going to understand the two different types of reinforcement, and you're going to have practical ways that you can apply it to shape appropriate or desirable behavior. Now, reinforcement is important because it is one of the two consequences that can immediately follow a behavior. Now, if a consequence that immediately follows a behavior leads to it occurring more in future, then it's a reinforcer. If a consequence that immediately follows a behavior leads to it reducing in future, then it is a punisher. So there are two types of reinforcement, positive and negative, just as there are two types of punishment, positive and negative. 104 will be about punishment, but today I'm going to focus on reinforcement. And the reason I'm focusing on reinforcement is that research has shown that reinforcement, particularly positive, is the most effective of the different consequences in engendering behavior change. Remember, I said that if the consequence that follows a behavior increases the likelihood of future occurrence, then it is a reinforcer. So we want to learn what are the things that we can do to strengthen, increase desirable behavior. That's the whole point of this video, so pay attention. The thing about reinforcement is that we already use it in our everyday life, most of the time inadvertently. So my work as a behavior coach is to teach you how you can deliberately use it on purpose. One example of how we already use reinforcement in our day-to-day lives is that if you help somebody and they say thank you, you're more than likely going to help them again in future, because thank you or gratitude is a positive reinforcer. So we use that already. And here we are wondering, why is the behavior that I want to occur not occurring? It's because we tend to focus a lot on undesirable behaviors, because for some reason we expect desirable behavior to just occur naturally. But that doesn't always happen, and that's the source of our stress. If you're a parent like me and you have little humans, they can be appropriate the whole day, but the one time they do something wrong, then my voice is raised, then I'm up in arms because I fully expect them to do what is right from the get-go. But the question is, where's all that energy when they're being appropriate? Why don't I have that passion when they're doing the right thing? It's because I take it for granted that appropriate behavior should be the default. But if you've worked with human beings enough, you realize that appropriate behavior doesn't always naturally occur. So if you know the science of behavior, you can use this principle to not only teach desirable behavior, but to also increase it and encourage it to happen more, which will reduce your stress because you're less likely to experience undesirable behavior because you've learned how to increase desirable behavior. So for example, if I'm a parent and my kid has been getting in trouble at school, I'm stressed out because they keep calling me and I'm warning this kid, you need to behave, you need to behave. And that goes on for a few weeks. And then for a whole week, there's no problem behaviors. Nobody calls me. Imagine if I knew that with positive reinforcement, I could tell this child, good job, you've done a great job this week. And that means that that child is going to continue to try to impress me by doing a good job because I acknowledge the good job. Why then aren't I doing that naturally? Perhaps it's because I don't realize the effect that positive reinforcement can have. So when you're done watching this video, you will know how to recognize appropriate behavior when you see it and what to do if you want to encourage it to continue. So there are two types of reinforcement: positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. And to make it easy for you to remember, I want you to think of positive as an addition and negative as a subtraction. So if you add something and the behavior increases in occurrence or it's strengthened, it's a positive reinforcer. And if you remove something, usually something aversive, and the behavior is strengthened, then it's a negative reinforcer. Let me give you as many examples as possible, starting with the little humans. As a parent, you want your little human to self-initiate from academic activity to chores. You want them to choose to do the right thing by themselves. So for some people, it comes naturally to them, so you're not going to worry about it. You're probably watching this video because you're like, why can't I get them to do the right thing? Well, let's just say maybe it's not naturally reinforcing to them. Like chores, nobody likes to do chores, even as an adult. However, we don't like the consequences from not doing chores, so we don't do them. Little humans don't have that kind of established reasoning yet, so it's on us to teach them. So is it possible for us to make a reinforcer be at the end of that behavior so that they're more likely to engage in that behavior? Absolutely. Remember, this is the science. If you change the consequence that immediately follows the behavior, you can increase or decrease the likelihood that it will occur. Look on my Instagram. There's a video from last summer where I was giving you an example of how my local library uses positive reinforcement to promote reading in children. So my Instagram is Behavior Coach G. You can go take a look at that video and you will see how that's a practical way to use positive reinforcement. Now with negative reinforcement, what you do with negative reinforcement, remember I said think of negative as subtracting or taking something away. So you remove something after that behavior occurs, usually an aversive stimulus. Like for example, if your little human is a picky eater and there are undesirable things on their plate that they don't want to eat, or for example, they just want to leave the table, they don't want to be there. So you can make leaving the table, which is aversive, staying at the table is aversive to them. You can remove that aversive if they complete a desirable task. So if you eat half of your vegetables, then you can get up from the table. Or if you complete all your homework throughout this week without needing any reminders, then you don't have to go to bed at 9 on Friday. You remove something aversive, which is going to bed early, and then they're more likely to engage in that behavior. An example for big humans: if your car has this beeping sound when you don't have your seatbelt on, that sound is aversive. But as soon as you put your seatbelt on and you click it in, that sound goes away. That's behavioral science, removing the aversive stimulus, which is that beeping sound, to encourage appropriate behavior, which is putting your seatbelt on. Think about how you get miles when you buy a plane ticket. They're rewarding the desirable behavior, which is loyalty. So instead, sometimes the ticket that you want to buy from that exact airline might be a little bit pricier, but then you're thinking about your miles and the reinforcer that you're going to contact at the end of engaging in that behavior. So what do? You buy it, or you stay loyal to a certain airline because of the rewards. That's behavioral science. So can you use it? Absolutely. Other examples: as an employer or a manager, you have the desirable behavior, for example, of people arriving at work on time. So you can add something: employee of the month, or maybe they're not late for a whole month and they can get a gift card, or there can be a raffle draw. Or for example, the person that always comes early can get out of a task that the whole group has to do, or the person that comes last has to do something for the other person. You can use practical things like that to encourage behavior to occur. Also, for yourself in self-management, you can use reinforcement for yourself. For example, I'm in grad school, and so studying can sometimes be hard. So what do? When I make my list of things to do every day, I add the preferred item, and then I add the non-preferred item, and I make access to the preferred item contingent on the completion of the non-preferred item. So for example, when I finish writing one page of my paper, then I can take a break and get on social media. So you can use reinforcement for yourself as an employer, for your friends, for your partner. If your partner does something that you like, you pay attention and you say, "Oh, I like how you got my order right today." And because you've paid attention and given something desirable, they're more likely to get your order right next time. Now, a response I often get is, "But this sounds like bribery. Why am I going to do that? That's something they should have done in the first place." But I want you to think about yourself and all the times you were more motivated to do something than other times, or all the people you were more motivated to do things for than other people. Why were you more likely to do that thing? Why were you more likely to engage in that activity? Is it because there was something preferred at the end of completing that activity? I need you to think about that and think about how, if that works for us, why do we expect it to be different for other people? Particularly little humans. We're like, you should do what you're supposed to do. Nobody should need to tell you before you do your homework. Nobody had to make me do that when I was little. When I was little, I will be punished if I didn't do the right thing. But I want you to think about how the reason for doing something can be the fear of punishment, which is escape and avoidance, or access to a tangible item or another kind of reward. As you're teaching desirable behavior in children, do you want them to go study because they're afraid of getting punished, or do you want them to go study because that's something they now enjoy because there's a preferred item at the end of that activity? So you might say to yourself, who needs all this mental gymnastics? But when you try it and you see the results, it's going to be so reinforcing to you that you're going to want to continue, because using reinforcers create a positive environment where the relationship is positive, because it's not fear-based and it's not based on the avoidance of punishment or pain. You can encourage your children to self-initiate academic activity. Maybe your child doesn't naturally like reading. Well, what if there's a reinforcer at the end of reading? They're going to start reading. Before you know it, it's going to become a habit that you're not even going to need to reinforce anymore. So think about motivation and human behavior and recognize that if the science says positive reinforcement is more effective than punishment, the question is, why aren't you using it? Or why do you prefer to go the hard way? Is that because you're not interested in learning something new or trying something new? I mean, it's pretty much up to you. But my job as a coach is to teach you how you can use the science. Some notes about reinforcement, especially if you're using it as part of a behavior intervention plan. Now remember, the things that I teach you when I make these videos are generic, and some of it might apply to you, some of it might not. So if you're watching this video because you have a specific set of problem behaviors or a pain point that's occurring because of a specific set of circumstances, I can understand if it's difficult for you to apply these things because there's so many things going on. So that's why I'm here as your behavior coach. If you contact me and you book a session, we can create what is called a behavior intervention plan. I can look at the situation that's going on when you explain it to me. I can analyze it, because remember, I'm board certified in behavior analysis. So we can look at what the functions of behavior are, determine what the problem behavior is, what the replacement behavior should be, and we put a plan in place to strengthen appropriate behavior, which would be the replacement for the inappropriate behavior. Another thing to also note is that all reinforcers are not the same for all people. So it's important to recognize the reinforcer for that specific person. Now, if you were working with me and I was designing an intervention plan for you, I will do what we call a preference assessment, which is figuring out exactly what are the most valuable reinforcers for this person. What does this person like a lot? And use that as a reward for when they're being appropriate, so that appropriate behavior can also increase. So as always, when you watch my videos, you're going to have homework. Observe behavior around you and give me some examples in the comment section about ways that you think you might be able to use reinforcement. Before you raise your voice or complain about something that somebody is doing inappropriately, ask yourself, what would I like them to be doing instead? What's the appropriate behavior? So if they're a little human, perhaps they don't have that skill yet. So you teach that skill, and every time they display that behavior, you reinforce that behavior. The more time you spend reinforcing appropriate behavior, the less occurrences of inappropriate behavior that you're going to find. It's the same for big humans as well. Before you go off on someone, ask yourself, what would I like them to be doing instead? And every time you see them do that thing, what you want to do is reinforce that behavior. In 104, which is the next video, I'm going to go into details about punishment, teach you about positive punishment and negative punishment as well. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all the feedback I'm getting and all the coaching leads I'm getting as well. So on Instagram and on Twitter, I'm Behavior Coach G, and also you can look on my website behaviorcoachg.com. Thank you.